Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Elevating Leadership, a strength-based, heart-centered approach to leading webinar. Whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are, your presence here matters. I'm John Picard from Faces and Voices of Recovery, and I'm honored to moderate today's event. This series is proudly hosted by the Colombo Plan, the International Society for Substance Use Professionals, ISSUP, Faces and Voices of Recovery, and the Global Recovery Network, GRN. These organizations are working together to strengthen recovery systems worldwide. While we are waiting for a few more of us to join, I'll begin by saying a little bit about ISSUP, a membership organization for the global substance use workforce with over 35,000 members worldwide. It is an international network that unites, connects, and shares knowledge across the substance use prevention, harm reduction, treatment, and recovery support workforce. ISSUP's global mission is to make the work of members as impactful, accessible, and effective as possible. They do this by making it easier to discover and share evidence-based knowledge, best practices, training, and network opportunities. If you've not done so already, please head over to ISSUP's website, that's issup.net, where you will find information on how to sign up for a free membership. The website also has a wealth of resources and publications for you to enjoy, and you can watch recordings of past webinars and see future event listings. All right, I'd like to thank the ISSUP staff for providing technical support for this webinar. So this is a 6-part series taking place every other Tuesday, concluding today, which is International Recovery Day, September 30th. Each phase of the series focuses on building knowledge and capacity across 3 areas: core foundations of recovery, returning to basics, and leadership development. So today's session, unfortunately, ends our leadership development phase and this webinar series. So today, we journey into elevating leadership, a strength-based, heart-centered approach to leading. It is my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Terrence D. Walton. A very warm welcome to you, and it is a pleasure to have you with us today. Terrence D. Walton is the Executive Director of NADAC, NAADAC, the Association for Addiction Professionals, a United States-based non-governmental organization, NGO. He has provided addiction-related consultation and training to governments, intergovernmental organizations, NGOs, and others in the United States, Canada, Vietnam, Colombia, Taiwan, Indonesia, Bolivia, Barbados, Mexico, Bermuda, and elsewhere. So prior to joining NADAC, he was the Chief Operating Officer of All Rise, a US-based NGO that was founded as the National Association of Drug Court Professionals. Previously, he was the Director of Treatment for a US federal government agency that provided alternatives to incarceration for people with drug use disorders who were arrested for crimes in Washington, D.C. Terrence holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology and a Master's of Social Work degree. He has devoted his professional life to promoting policies, programs, and practices that help individuals, families, communities, and countries experience lasting healing, health, and happiness. Before we get started today, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. Today's session is in English with interpretation available in Spanish. Please check the link in the chat to access the Spanish interpretation. The session will be recorded and you will receive the slides, the video, and resources via email after the session. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to our presenter by typing your questions into the questions pane of the webinar interface on your screen. We love questions, so you may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We're going to collect them and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. And now it is my pleasure to hand over the webinar to our esteemed presenter, Terrence. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, John, and hello, everyone. It is amazing to be with you today, especially on a topic that is this important. I've so long appreciated the work of ISSUP and appreciate their invitation to be a part to close out this leadership series and Faces and Voices of Recovery and NADAC, the Association for Addiction Professionals, are longtime partners fighting in the US and internationally for people living with addiction and those of us who have dedicated our lives and our hearts to helping them to be free. And no matter what you do in this field, leadership is essential. We'll talk today about leadership in many of its facets. Leadership is sometimes about position, but leadership is really about influence, regardless of whether you have the position or not. I'm certain out there we have individuals who are in leadership at various levels and have been and are attending this webinar today or watching it on demand to enhance your leadership so that you can lead more effectively. There are others out there who are aspiring to leadership. And you joined us today because you want to understand how, once you reach the point you want to reach, once you advance and move forward, you want to do so in a way where you're making a difference for good. And then there are others who are not in any particular leadership position and are not looking for position, but they're issues you care about and there are causes that you lead and there are moments when you need to step up as a human being and be heard and influenced. And that's all leadership. And so I'm glad that you're with us today as we talk about it. I love the title. This content is developed by Faces and Voices of Recovery. And I love the way they have titled this, Elevating Leadership. I like that alone. I think that's a great main title because leadership is out there. We want to elevate it and put a spotlight on it and recognize and help it to be very clear how important leadership is. Now, it matters what happens throughout an organization or throughout a country. It matters what citizens want and what stakeholders want. But leadership isn't just about reacting to what's out there. It's not primarily about reacting to what's out there. It's about influencing what's out there, about influencing decisions people make in positive ways. So I think it's a good time internationally to elevate leadership and to allow all of us to think about an action plan around effective, strength-based, heart-centered leadership. That's as good as it gets. Meaning that if I am leading, I am recognizing the whole world that's out there, and I'm trying to build on the strengths and competencies that are out there in the people who I work with. Yes, we don't deny problems, we don't deny deficiencies. Good leadership isn't about denying what's out there. Good leadership isn't about putting your head in the sand. Good leadership is recognizing positives and negatives, strengths and weaknesses, and finding ways to build on the strengths to overcome the negatives. But I like the heart-centered approach, especially because at the end of the day, we are not robots. We are not bots. We are not artificial intelligence. We are people, human beings, men and women who are doing the best we can on any given day. And if you're like me, and I've been in leadership for 3 decades, if you're like me, then some days my best is amazing. And some days my best is just so because I'm a person and I bring to every situation kind of the best I got that day. And sometimes I'm on fire, and that I don't know how that translates, but that's a good thing. Sometimes I'm on fire in a good way. And other times I'm just barely figuring out what I'm doing. And that's normal. That's a part of being a human being. And so my first lesson for us is to recognize that we lead from our heart because we lead as human beings and we bring to the table who we are. And while we may have a work persona, we may have a work facade, we may have a way we are in our professional lives, and then we're different in our private lives, but at the end of the day, we're the same person. And so those who have a heart for leadership lead from the heart, and we'll unpack that today. So listen, we've only got, because I'm going to leave some time for questions, so I got an hour to talk with you. We may not get to every single slide, but I think we'll get to the stuff that matters most, because I do want to reserve 15 or so minutes at the end, no matter what, to hear from you, to hear your questions and your observations on leadership. We'll spend some time, maybe a little more than I'd like to, but it's really important to talk about leadership styles, because there are different ways of leading, and research shows that leaders, even successful leaders, have very different personalities. They have different ways of leading. And even more fascinating is the fact that sometimes the same leader will lead in a different way based on the organization they're leading or a particular situation the organization is facing, where they may be leading in a completely different way, a different manner than they normally are. So it is important to me that you understand sort of the 6 styles of leadership we'll outline. I will give you some suggestions on some techniques to think about your own leadership style or potential for style. We won't have time to practice it today, but I'll give you some suggestions, and there'll be some links that you can go to later on to study your own style and identify it, because it does matter. And we'll talk about later why it really matters for you to know and recognize your own style, as well as the style of those who lead you. I don't care where you are in the, in the organization, there's someone that you're accountable to. I'm at the top of my organization, but I report to a board. And so, yes, it's important that I understand my own leadership style. It's also important that I have a sense of the leadership style of people who I'm accountable to, because I can help to us to have a good relationship, and I can help better fulfill the vision and mission of my organization if I understand sort of the styles and the leadership styles of the people around me. Again, we'll show you some resources for professional development. I hope you are really interested in this topic. I hope you've been a part of the other webinars in this series, because it does, thinking about leadership matters. Being intentional about leadership matters, and it can help you to be more effective. I'll talk about some things about change responses and how we lead in different ways depending on different situations, and ultimately the goal here is to find ways wherever we are to develop leaders all around us. That smart leaders want to be surrounded by other leaders, people who lead based on position or lead based on personality or situation. We want to be surrounded by leaders and potential leaders if we're working on something that matters. So, um, so, let me say a little bit more about sort of the sort of some basics about leadership that I think are really important. That leadership is about service. And I want to pause there, because sometimes when people are aspiring to leadership, or they're imagining what it would be like to be higher up on the ladder where they are, they think about some of the privileges and perks that come with leadership. And there are some. I mean, you have more influence, you have ability to sort of establish policies and procedures, you can make things happen, you probably have more flexibility and freedom to spend your time. That's certainly true. But people who are in leadership, especially as you rise through leadership, you recognize that leadership is always about sacrifice and service, that you become dedicated to the people on your team, that you often are working harder and longer than everyone else. Now, hopefully you're finding some balance, because that's another problem. But you find that because of your desire to move your organization forward, to move your country forward, to move your whatever your affiliation is, to move it forward, that your main job is to equip and empower the people who work with you, and and that really matters. So servant leadership focuses on how I can help others be their best, and that really is the best way for me to ensure that the vision that I've been a part of setting, that the core mission of my organization is reached. The best way I can do that is to support those around me. I think this last point is also important, and that is leadership is responsive and flexible based on what's actually going on. Now, Most of us have a preferred style. People who work with me know I have a certain way I normally interact with them. I have a certain way that I lead. And that's sort of my core style. I didn't choose that. It is how I am. Some of it is natural, some of it I have learned over time that certain leadership approaches get better results than others. But there are times that I lead very differently than normal because the circumstances are different at this moment. And we may have a chance to talk about a couple of those examples. So I hope that matters. And the last thing I want to say is that, you know, even in a dictatorship, even in a dictatorship where there is someone who has absolute power, that even if I had absolute power, and thank God I do not, and I hope you don't either, but even if I had absolute power over anything, I would be wise to nonetheless listen to the viewpoints of others. Did you catch that? Let me say that again in case that got lost in translation. That even if I had absolute power, even if you had absolute power, you would be wise to seek out wise counsel and advice from others. The wise kings throughout the world's history have listened to advisors because that's how you make good, sound decisions, even if at the end of the day, you are the final decider. Even if at the end of the day, when it's all over, you get to decide. I hope that, especially about big things, things that matter, you are listening to wise people around you. And that means, don't miss this, that means, my friends, you're listening to people who don't always agree with you. They may respect you. I hope they do. They shouldn't be on your team if they don't respect you. And you shouldn't stay on the team with someone you can't respect any longer than you have to. So they may respect you and they may admire your gifts and admire your knowledge. And they may indeed follow your leadership. But I hope you have people around you, close to you, who don't always agree with you, who will say respectfully, I think that's a mistake. That's important as well. So we're going to talk about, there's lots of different models and different researchers and authors and thinkers who have defined leadership styles in different ways. So we don't pretend this is the only way to look at the different styles of leadership. We've just chosen one because it's well researched and it's been around for a long time, 20 years or more. It's been studied and it's useful. So this is by Daniel Goleman, who, if you've ever heard of Daniel Goleman, you either know him from this work or his work on emotional intelligence and leaders. And that's not what this webinar is about, so I can't talk about emotional intelligence, but that is probably what Daniel Goleman is more famous for. But he's also done wrote about some research done on various leadership styles, and those styles which are have a generally more positive or more negative impact on an organization. And the first part of our discussion today is based on Daniel Goleman's research. By the way, the title of his article is Leadership That Gets Results, and it has been out a while, so it's in the public domain. If you search for it, you can find Leadership That Gets Results and download it and read the study. This is a study after from interviewing thousands and thousands of executives, identifying their styles, and then assessing the impact of those styles. So we'll talk about six styles today, and let's start with the first one as we move forward. So this first one are individuals whose normal leadership style is authoritative. Now that word itself triggers people in different ways. Some people, when they hear the word authoritative, they think, okay, that's a person who is confident. That's a person who's not afraid to make a decision. Because listen, there is nothing more frustrating than following the leader who cannot make a decision. Even if we don't disagree at some point, we need somebody to decide because we're just spinning around in circles here. For some of us, the term authoritative is comforting. It makes us feel safe and well guided. For other people, just the word authoritative can seem like intimidating, and it can make us feel afraid or resentful that someone is trying to be the boss of me. I've got school-aged children. I'm an older father. I have a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old, and my wife and I are amused when we watch our children, especially my son, who's now gotten older, where he's clearer that his sister is not the boss of him. He's clear about that now, and he is saying that loud and proud. And sometimes he thinks mommy and daddy aren't the boss of him either. So it just seems like we have a thing about authority. So sometimes we hear the word authority, we have it more negatively. But what this really means, and there's a lot, and even some of the bullets we've chosen to put on the screen, this is someone who part of their traits of leadership is decisiveness and confidence. They appear strong. You know, hopefully they're not strong and wrong, because sometimes folks are strong and wrong. We have examples of leaders, everywhere that are strong but wrong. But regardless, people like strong. They like a confident leader. This person often has a direct communication style. You don't have to wonder if they're happy or not. You don't have to wonder what they think. They have a more direct style. Sometimes they have organizations that have very clear rules and procedures. We've written here they have strict rules. Okay, if that seems too harsh for some, that means it's just very clear that there are expectations, and even if we decide to deviate from the rules, there are rules and procedures. Now, sometimes authoritative leaders also, don't delegate much. Now, sometimes they, sort of keep all the decisions to themselves, and they don't trust others. That's not a admirable trait, but sometimes it exists. Um, an authoritative leader often has a performance focus, that they are focused on the bottom line. And I don't mean money, it might be money, but the bottom line might be service. Like for those of us who are working in NGOs that are nonprofits, our bottom line isn't making ourselves rich. Our bottom line is serving, and serving in the most effective and efficient way as possible, so we can help as many people as possible and do the greater good for our communities and our countries and our worlds. But often an authoritative leader is focused on the performance, the mission. And here we say they have limited empathy. Well, sometimes that's true. Sometimes an authoritative leader, even if they care and understand the pain and the feelings of the people they're working with, or what needs to happen, they make decisions based on the facts. And sometimes that means they have to put their empathy aside. Now, we'll say that any leader who has no empathy is ineffective. That leader is not going to be effective if they don't have empathy. This is about heart leadership. This is about leading from your heart. Even if you have to put your feelings aside and make decisions, uh, being aware of the impact of your decisions, the impact of whether you choose to listen to someone or not, recognizing that the impact of not just my decisions, but my process, the way I make my decisions, recognizing that the process I use in interacting with people can impact how they feel, can impact their esteem, can in fact impact their value, and therefore can impact their performance. So while sometimes authoritative leadership traits seem like uh, sometimes people don't have empathy, the leader isn't empathetic, but those who lead in this way effectively, they have plenty of empathy. They often have to make decisions that are hard, but they make decisions knowing they're hard. They make decisions knowing that people are impacted in ways that might be tough for them. Sometimes this is referred to as sort of command and control leadership. Again, in some settings, that's exactly what that is. So my point is, and that'll be true for most of these, my point is that even if your primary leadership style is any one of these, like authoritative or the one we're going to talk about next, that depending on how that manifests itself, depending on as an authoritative leader, what that actually looks like in the real world from you, that can determine whether that is a very positive leadership trait or one that's quite negative on the environment. At the very end, I'll tell you the ones of these that have been found to be more or less effective. And I'll give you a hint, most of them, most of these six have found to have an overall positive effect on organizations. Most of them. There are a couple of exceptions, but most of the six we'll talk about had been found in this research and in Goleman's research were found to have an overall positive effect on their organizations, even though they're very different styles. It's a good lesson to learn there. There are a couple of exceptions. There's a couple that generally have a more negative effect. And there's one that was the most positive of all. And you're probably going to be surprised by which one that is. But that's coming later. All right. The next style we'll talk about is the coaching style. And again, these are those who have coaching leadership traits. That means if they took a survey and someone rated them or they rated themselves, that they tend to have more coaching leadership traits. These are people are heavy on empathy. They're very connected with the people around them. It's easier for them to find people's strengths and to work with people who are struggling and find ways to bring out greater value from them. They're great for helping poorer performers become adequate performers. They're also really good at people who are sort of average performers really being their best. And they can also be really effective at helping people who are superstars become even greater. They do a lot of listening. They do a lot of affirming people's progress. A smart coach doesn't ignore, though, the problems. A smart coach says, okay, that wasn't quite right. Great effort. I like that you did this here, but here's what else needs to happen. The next time you do this, try this. So they are positive, they affirm, but that doesn't mean that they ignore deficiencies. It doesn't mean that they ignore mistakes. A good coach really encourages their employees to talk about the mistakes they've made. I have been very blessed in lots of ways in my career. I've been, I'm a man of faith, so I believe very much in a God as I understand God, and I know that God has blessed me. And I've been blessed by people. I've had a lot of really good leaders that I could work under, both in non-professional capacities and in my career. And my first real supervisor in the field, I wasn't even a drug counselor yet. I began my career before I got into leadership. I began my career as an adolescent drug counselor. And my first real supervisor, even before I was a counselor, when I was like what they call a tech in the US. So I was like a helper in the treatment center. But he saw a lot of potential in me and he coached me at that very low level. I didn't even have a degree yet and I had no credential. But at that level, he saw a lot in me and coached me. He allowed me to sit in on like groups and meetings that I really wasn't supposed to be there because he was coaching me. And he gave me a piece of advice early on that I tried to never forget. And I pass it on to those who have worked on my teams. And that is, he said, Terrence, I can see that you like to do things right, that you try to do a really good job, because I do. And that's nothing wrong with that. But he said, do the best job you can, but don't be afraid to make mistakes. He said, because you learn a lot more from mistakes than you do from doing it the right way. He said, you learn a lot more doing it the wrong way than you do the right way, as long as you learn from it. And so that is what coaches do really well. They help people. We don't say that was not a mistake. We don't try to, pretty that up. We make it clear, okay, this didn't go well. You didn't do the right thing. You didn't tell the truth. You blew your cool, whatever it was in leadership where you messed up. We all mess up in leadership. I should do a webinar called We All Mess Up in Leadership, because we do. But a coach style helps individuals to recognize what they can learn from that. Again, one of the possible weaknesses of the coach style would be if all they do is coach, and their coaching means they're not holding people accountable. That'd be a problem in this style. I got to move more quickly. Let's talk about the affiliative leadership traits. Affiliative leadership traits. This is a style that really values the harmony, the synergy, the connection of the team. They're people where that is how they are, that they pull people together. There's a lot of talk in our world today about divisions and differences. Those who have affiliative leadership traits, they really focus on connecting people. And in a key way they lead is by helping the team to come together to collectively solve problems. In this case, an, an affiliative leader focuses more on the people over the task. Now, that doesn't mean no one's getting any work done. I mean, it doesn't have to mean that. It just means that even when work is getting done, they love to walk by the eating area or the break room or the water cooler or the coffee break place. They love to see staff in there talking and laughing. To them, that doesn't mean they're goofing off. That means, wow, they're connecting. That if they have a meeting, they're okay. If people are disagreeing and if people are upset, but before the meeting ends, they want people to come together and say, okay, we had some differences today, but we're still on the same team. And this leader will work really hard to bring resolution to problems that are lingering because they focus on the affiliation, the connection of the people on their team. They're much more likely to believe the roles can switch from one to the other. They're much more likely to lead in a way where if someone's behind, someone jumps in to help out. That's part of their style. They encourage people to try new things and take risk, and use the team to support you in that. So again, that's a style that is out there. That some people, that's the normal way they work, and um, and the downside to that style would be if the focus was on the team and the people over everything else, and then critical work's not getting done, or individuals who are not performing are not being corrected. That could be an issue there. Now, next is the democratic leadership trait. This is a person who, yes, like the affiliate leader, they do care about the team, but they really don't. They like decisions to be made basically by reaching consensus. For this leader, even if as the leader, you know, that they really believe something else should happen, this kind of leader might be likely to decide to defer to the team if the team really disagreed. And maybe that's fine. There are certain things as a smart leader that even if you believe a different way, if you have a team that you trust, a team that's more connected out there in the community than you are, you might be very wise to say, all right, I think this, but what do you all think? I've done that sometimes. It, I won't really talk much about what my normal style is. You might be able to pick it up, maybe. But I will tell you, there are times I use different styles. Sometimes on issues at the organization that I help to lead. Sometimes, I've got a pretty good idea of what I think should happen here, but I decide, okay, I'm going to defer to the team. I'm going to let's vote. What y'all think? Reach consensus. If y'all come to agreement, I'll go along with what you want. There are other times I don't do that though. There's something happened very recently in my organization, and I and even though key people on my team who I trusted believe we should go one way, I went a different direction. I don't do that all the time, but I did this time. And it's too early for me to tell you how it turned out. But in this style, in the democratic leadership trait style, that there is a lot of flexibility. They really want the team to come together and reach decisions by consensus whenever possible. This next style, this one's a little harder to understand. It took me a little longer to sort of figure out where this fit, but this is sort of the pace setting leadership style. And I guess the best way I can say is this is a person, a leader who is exceptional. They have a high standard. They are good performers. They are an example of excellence themselves, and they need teams that are also excellent. They set the example, and they expect you to follow that example without a lot of direction. This person isn't looking for a couple of people on the team who have potential. They need to be surrounded by a team of A-listers. I don't know how that translates anywhere, but A-listers, like people who are at the top of their game. That's the kind of teams they want. And that's the kind of team that they would lead best. It's a real drive for improvement. And the leader sets themselves up as the example. Like, follow me, do this as I'm doing it. And in this case, people who work successfully under this kind of leader will need to be excellent. So I don't mean it to sound like negative, but that's kind of what it is. There are leaders who sometimes that's in like in industry and other in nonprofit settings where that's how they are. They are exceptional, and they are not interested in anyone around them who isn't also exceptional. A strong drive for improvement. And then there is this what Goleman calls the coercive leadership trait. Coercive. In this case, based on whatever's going on, this leader needs immediate compliance with what they have decided. There are clear communications about the job and its functions. There are definitely clear guidelines and there's structure. In this case, they often make quick and concrete decisions that need to be followed. I'll just say, and you can probably think about like what kind of job or what kind of industry or organization might need this kind of leadership. What comes to mind to me is the military, especially in time of combat, or perhaps a person who is a first responder to a burning building. That there needs to be clarity ahead of time about what needs to happen, how it happens, and any change that needs to happen on the ground. There's someone making that decision, and people do it without taking a vote. And so we've talked about multiple styles here. We just talked about the coercive or commanding style, sort of do what I tell you. All right, do what I tell you. Let's keep it moving. The pace setting style. This is the one that do as I do and do it now. Be like, follow me, follow my excellence. The authoritative style is sort of come with me, follow me. I might not have said this before, but the authoritative style often has set a vision. They're good at casting a vision and helping people to have the confidence in them to follow that vision. The affiliative style, people come first. It doesn't mean they don't care about the work, but people come first. And that's how they lead. The democratic style is really values not just the people, but their opinions and their expertise and their viewpoint. And in their leadership, they often lead by gaining consensus from the people they lead. And then a coaching style, they want people to try it, make mistakes. They're there to support them, point out the mistakes, the strengths, etc. So listen, all these, I just want you to, we don't have time to talk about today, but all these styles have a place. And there are times when any one of the styles might be what is needed for the situation. And because we don't have time for suspense and we can't take a poll and I can't have you talk about something like I wish I could, let me just tell you that most of these styles in this research, you can't really see that, but in this research, most of these styles were found to have an overall positive effect on the organizations where the leader demonstrated that kind of style. The two exceptions, the two of these that generally had a negative impact was that first one there, the coercive style, and then the one after that, the pace setting style. The coercive, commanding, do what I tell you. In the research that had that actually had a more negative effect overall on most of the organizations that were led by a leader like that. The pace setting style, the one where the person is excellent themselves and needs excellence around them, that also in the survey tended to have more negative impact. It doesn't mean that everyone who leads in a coercive or pace setting way has failed in leadership, because there were some examples where it went okay. But overall, those were the two in the research that were found to have a negative impact. All the rest of them were found to have an overall positive impact, even though they're very different: authoritative, affiliative, democratic, and coaching. They all, if you read the study yourself, leadership that gets results, Daniel Goleman, they all were found to have an overall positive effect. And the one that was shown to have the most positive effect of all was number 3 there, the authoritative. Authoritative. And that was, folks, I'm certain, not because this person was a dictator, because that'd be coercive. It's because this person set a clear vision. They were confident. They made it clear to people. They listened. They have to have some empathy, because people don't, if they follow you because they have to, they don't really follow you. They follow you best when they want to. And so this style of leadership, when done well, was the most effective of all. People had clarity. They had confidence. They hopefully have done well, had some input in the decisions, but the decisiveness of leadership matter. And that's something that we should ponder. There are people who see that differently. And those of us who are in the business of helping people, we're social workers, we're substance use professionals, we're others who lead with our heart. Sometimes we aren't as comfortable like leading from the front in a more decisive way. But the bottom line is all of these approaches have a place, and that real good leadership requires some flexibility. All of us have a style, and if you haven't gotten your style yet, you will develop a leadership style. It's a way you normally work. It's consistent with your view of life, your personality, what feels right to you. But even if that is true, even though that is true, that really effective leaders recognize that, first of all, certain people on my team require something different from me. And so part of my being effective are those who report directly to me, knowing like what kind of leadership do they need to be their best. And also there are times in an organization where something has occurred that requires a different kind of leadership. And having been an emotionally intelligent leader means recognizing that and being able to intentionally change your leadership style to better respond to whatever is going on right now or whoever you're working with. This person, I don't know who she is. Someone should put in the chat who Thelma Bryant Davis is. I should have searched her first, but I didn't research that. So bad for me. But whoever she is, she says something that's great, that's important. Just pay attention to your patterns. She didn't say pay attention to other people's patterns and try, she said pay attention to your patterns. Me pay attention to mine, you pay attention to yours. She said the way you learn to survive may not be the way you want to continue to live. Heal and shift. So that's just good advice. Let's just pause for a second. That's not even about leadership. That's about life. That's about who you are as a person. Because remember, I began by saying you're not a robot. You're not a bot. You're not AI. You are a living, breathing person with a spirit and a soul, with weaknesses and strengths, with emotions, with good days and bad days, with traumas in some cases, with victories, with failures. We're all of that. And Thelma Bryant Davis, whomever she is, she says, pay attention to that and recognize that what you had to do to survive isn't necessarily what you need to do to thrive and move forward. That's also true organizationally. Maybe you came from one organization that was toxic, and you're in another organization and you're still acting as if you're in the old one. The main point here is in leadership, be self-aware. Probably one of the toughest things is to be working with a leader who isn't self-aware. That's a problem. So be aware of your own leadership traits, how you instinctively lead, how you instinctively react or respond, and pause, give it some time, and decide, is that the right way to respond right now? Is my normal approach and style and traits, is that what's needed right now? And if not, what is? All right, we got to keep going here. We're doing okay. All right. So, folks, one of and this is something I have learned in leadership. I did not always know this. There are some things that come with getting older, and sometimes you get wiser. I mean, not automatically. There are plenty of old fools out there, people who are old in age, but babies in wisdom. But if you allow life to, it will teach you. If you allow your experiences to teach you, they will. If you allow yourself, if you are gentle with yourself and courageous enough as a person to learn from your failures, your mistakes, the things you are ashamed of, if you will allow yourself to learn from those and grow from those, you will. And so effective leaders pay attention to themselves. They are self-reflective. They spend some time in the day, either after the day, on the drive home, on the commute home, when they're downloading, when they're resting, thinking about the day and their reactions. If you have a spiritual practice, you're meditating about it or praying about it, thinking about your day, how you reacted, how you presented. Is there something you missed because you were too busy? Is there someone you were a little too short with, or you brushed them aside? Is there someone you need to apologize to? I have a fairly commanding style of leadership, and I am quick to apologize if I have wronged someone, whether I thought I did or not. I don't think that's a sign of weakness. I do it regularly. Say, sorry about that. That I was too harsh. Can we start over? I apologize for that. So self-reflection means you're also paying attention to how you are doing. If your cup is empty, you can't give someone else to drink what you don't have. And none of us are perfect. We all get busy. We all get overwhelmed. That's just life. But in general, we want to be sure we are paying attention to ourselves, we're reflecting about ourselves, and we're doing everything we can to be sure that the way we are reacting, the way we are living, the way we are leading is consistent with who we are and who we want to be. If the person I want to be is a person who is upright with integrity, who treats people well, who listens and make decisions, is that who I was today? If not, okay, I'm not gonna, flog myself and beat myself. If there's someone I need to make amends to, I'm gonna do that. If there's someone I need to apologize to, I'm gonna do that. But ultimately, I'm gonna reflect and say, okay, I'll do every day is a brand new opportunity to be the kind of person, the kind of leader I want to be. So I encourage you to do this on your own. I believe you have access to these slides. I think these slides are available somewhere. I hope so. If not, email me and I'll send them to you. Think about these kinds of things. This is an exercise. This is a tool for self-reflection that you can review and ask yourself these questions as often as you need to reflect on how you are presenting in life, how you are leading. That's an important. Self-reflection matters. take heed to yourself. Again, here are some questions that are suggested, some ways you can think about either yourself, your effectiveness in an organization or on a particular issue. It could be about a particular thing or overall and global. Sometimes we apply this kind of self-reflection to a whole organization. NADAC, the Association for Addiction Professionals, the organization I hope to lead, we are about to engage in a strategic planning period over the next year as we establish a new strategic vision for our 53-year-old organization about where we go in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, how we lead in our space where we are. And we might very well ask questions like that about our organization, self-reflection from the organization. So I'm going to talk quickly about two other tools. These are we probably give you some tools, two other tools you can use on your own. We won't have time to do it here, but you can do this on your own. And you actually should if you haven't already. They can be very useful. There'll be 3 tools we'll talk about, but 2 in particular. One you probably heard of, the other 2 not so sure. So I know who Stephen Covey is. Stephen Covey is a great writer of leadership. He's a writer that I read when I was very young and wanting to get into leadership because he bases his writings on servant-based leadership. And I've always viewed leadership as an opportunity to serve, to not to receive, but to give. And so Stephen Covey says, if you don't choose to do it in leadership time, let me say it differently. If you don't choose to do it in leadership time up front, you do it in crisis management time down the road. If you're not giving reflection right now to yourself, to your direction, to who you are and how you lead, later on you're going to have to, when things explode and your leadership has crumbled around you and beneath you. Then you're going to look back and say, wait, what did I do here? And how did this happen? And why didn't I see this? And why aren't people following me? And why, do it now, he says, when things are okay. It's almost like if you run an organization and you want to get a line of credit. Let's talk business for a minute. You say, listen, we want a little safety net in our organization so that if some revenues haven't come in or some grant hasn't paid out yet, I want to be able to still pay my people. So I want to get a little line of credit. Well, let me give you a hint. Because I've led all kind of organizations, from tiny ones to ones like the one I run now. And the best time to go to a bank and secure a line of credit is when you don't need one. When you got decent money in the bank, your credit rating's good, that's when you go and get a line of credit that you can have on the side if you ever need it. If you wait to try to get a line of credit when you have almost no money and things are looking bad, good luck on that. So do it now. Do it now where things are okay, so that later on you won't have to do it then. So the first approach is one you've probably heard of, the Johari window. I have done that for years. It's really important. This recognizes that when it comes to ourselves and as leaders and as people, that we have all these different windows that are all true for us. They're the open area, sometimes called the arena. These are things that you and others know about you. My team, especially the team I led for 10 years, they know me well. The team I led for 15 years before that, they know me even better. But even my new team that I've been with for just under 2 years now, they're getting to know me. And so there are things about me, my style, my leadership, me as a person that I know and they know. It's the open area, the arena. There's also these other things. These are things, there's this other area, these things that you don't know about yourself, but others do. These are my blind spots. This is really important. This is why you need people around you. First of all, you need whoever's in your household, whoever loves you, your wife, your husband, your partner, your girlfriend, whoever it is, your child, your parent, your sister, your brother. You need someone close to you who will tell you the truth about you, first of all. But in the workplace, there are things about you, about how you come across, about your tendency that you don't know, but others do. It might be great things. You know, the last job that I left, when I moved from being the chief operating officer for the organization that was then known as the National Association of Drug Court Professionals to become the executive director and chief executive officer of NADAC, where I am now, like the people I heard from after I left, who pointed out how valuable I had been to them and things they really loved, things I hadn't really thought about, I didn't know. So sometimes your blind area are things that you need to be affirmed for. You may not recognize the impact you're making. You may not even know that people see you as someone who really listens. So that's you need to know that. So you can keep doing it. But other times, and probably even more importantly, there are things about you that are not so positive that you don't really recognize. You might think you're really approachable, but people don't find you that way. You might think you're really respectful, but people may not experience you that way. So being courageous enough to learn about your blind spots, your blind areas, is a part of good leadership. Then there's the hidden areas. These are things that I know about me, but no one else does. It's part of my facade. Now, listen, no one should know everything about you except your higher power. No one should know everything, and you decide who knows what. And in the workplace, definitely no one should know everything. But even if we're just thinking about things in leadership and my strengths and weaknesses, there may be some strengths, some weaknesses, or some knowledge gaps that I'm aware of that I'm trying to hide from other people. You decide what's safe to do where you are. But let me give you a hint, folks. Transparency and authenticity in leadership is helpful. Being able to say, I don't know anything about that. Can y'all help me? Can you enlighten me? Teams appreciate that. They hate if we pretend to know stuff we don't know. And even if we used to know it, if we haven't done the work up front in 20 years, maybe we need to find out what's going on now. Hidden areas. Things that I know I don't know, or things about me that are true that I want to hide from others. Sometimes maybe you should hide it. But other times, think about, how I can model authenticity and vulnerability by allowing some of my hidden areas to become known. Having assumed a leadership position rather recently, I've had to be very transparent with both my team and my board areas that I'm not sure about, or listen, I'm not clear on this, and I don't understand this as much, and I don't have the history here, so I need help with this. Hidden areas. And then there are the unknown areas, that window there that's just a black box, the things that neither you nor others know about you, but it's true. There may be something that's driving how you react, something that's triggering you that you don't even recognize. And neither do they, but it shows the impact. The impact is felt. So listen, there are all kinds of exercises you can do online free that allow you to explore your Johari window. And you really want your blind areas to become areas that you see, where you can have a sense of how things are and where you are. You really want to be intentional about allowing some of your hidden areas to be known by others, if that's a helpful, safe thing to do. That can help to take the pressure off you. It can help to free people on your teams to know they can do that too. It's okay to say, I struggle with this. It's okay to say, I'm having a really, really hard time in life right now. I'm sorry if I'm not myself. Please let me know if I'm coming off wrong, because I'm just struggling right now. It's okay to say that. Don't go into a whole lot of details. This isn't therapy, but it's okay. It's okay for folks to know you're human. They appreciate that. That allows them to be human, because they don't have any choice, right? We're all humans. So listen, we can stay there all day, but we don't have all day. Now here's another one. I've never heard of this. This is Nohari Window. This is different. All right. So you see there's a lot of words up there. Look at that screen. Look at your screen. Look at those words right there. Now, like none of these words are words that we would want associated with us. None of these traits are traits that any of us aspire to. Like if any of you or any of us aspire to any of those, that's, I don't know what to say about that. I hope you're not in leadership. So none of these things are traits we want to apply to us. However, there are probably some of these traits here that, like, if we had to choose 4 or 5, we could choose them. Because, like, maybe sometimes we're that way, or we're kind of that way. And that's what this exercise is. You can go on, you can go on the website. That's a link to a website. It'll give you this, and you're supposed to pick 4 or 5 of these that apply to you. This was so hard. This was so hard for me to do because I said, well, none of these are me. So, but it said you pick 4 or 5 that apply to you sometimes, or sort of apply to you, or of the ones that are there, what are the 4 or 5 that, if they did apply, that apply to you? And you're supposed to pick them. And then you send this to 4 or 5 other people and ask them to do the same thing about you. Now, you better be ready for this. I didn't do that part yet. I'm still thinking about that. But this is designed to really to open up your blind spot, so you can see how people might see you. So I'm gonna leave that there because I didn't try it all the way through, but it's a powerful exercise. And just me looking at that and trying to find 4 or 5 that I think, well, maybe sometimes that's me, or maybe when I'm not on, when I'm not well centered and I'm not prayed up, it's me. It was a useful exercise, and I hadn't even sent it to anyone else yet. And so the really important thing here is that we recognize that, and I got to do this part quickly because I want to wrap up in 9 minutes here. That a hallmark of leadership is change. Even in a well-run organization that's been around for 53 years, like NADAC, the Association of Prediction Professionals, and as long as ISSUP has been around, and others, that even in an organization that's amazing, change is always a part of leadership. Why is that? I wish I could get response from y'all, but I can't get responses. I can't do that right now. But the reason why change in any organization is essential is because our external environment is always changing. The world is changing. The needs of people living with addiction, the needs of organizations, the political structures, and the context is always changing. And if your leadership isn't also helping to lead change, then your organization becomes a dinosaur. In the US, we used to have something called Blockbuster Video, a video store. They're all gone. There used to be a product called a BlackBerry. A BlackBerry. The BlackBerry was the hottest thing. BlackBerries are all gone now. If you're not changing, you're falling behind. And so really quickly, whenever there's change, and I can't help you with this, I can only point it out right now. But wherever you are and wherever you need to go, along the line, there'll be people who react to that differently. There are people who are very valuable, who really value the way things are. And that's not necessarily negative. They're the ones that will be sure you don't lose your soul in the process of changing. They'll be the ones that be sure you say, wait a minute, no, there's a reason why we do this. That's very valuable. They might look like they're resistant to change and they don't want new ideas. That might be true too. But it can be very valuable. I always want some tradition holders around me, especially in a position like I'm in right now, where my job is to move things forward and to change. I want to be sure I don't lose the soul of my organization because of change. So you have tradition holders on your team, around you, or in your community, who will help preserve that. Then there are road builders. They're people who will get on board But they got to know more. They got to know, wait, what's this going to look like? They need you to take your time. They're not opposed to it, but they have to have a sense of, what are you trying to go here? Where are we headed? And they'll help you get there, but you need to work with them. Give them the facts. Be sure that they help you think it out. They're not just going to leap. But they'll be the ones who get it done if you spend the time with them to help them understand where you're trying to go, where the road's headed, how we're building it, what's it going to cost, what we're going to lose. That's important. And then there are leapers, and these are visionaries. They love change. They want things. They want growth. They want expansion. They're good too. But if you only had leapers on your team, and if you're a leaper too, you're all going to crash and burn. If you only have tradition holders, and you are too, you're going to stay the same and become irrelevant. If you only have role builders, you're going to study something to death. You're going to experience the paralysis of analysis and never actually get moved forward. We need all of us on a team to make it work. All right, let me wrap up here. Listen, this is an activity you can do on your own, where it asks you to learn your own change response and how you would more likely react to these actions here. You can do this with yourself and your team. I encourage you to do that on your own. And then this will let you know whether you are usually a leaper, a role builder, or a tradition holder. All three are necessary on the team, but who are you? This is the Kubler-Ross change curve. It was really based on grief, the stages of grief. And this is also the same sort of curve that happens as people are adjusting to change. A fascinating concept. I encourage you to study it on your own. So another tool for change, there's a number of, when you look at developing your team, there are ways you can do that. The examples here are like sort of in-service days, full in-service days. They're both part team building and then also working on some task, because some of your team will be completely irritated by a day full of team building. They don't want to play games. They're not here to get to know you, but they don't want a whole day of that, but they will do some. So some team building, with also some tasks they're working on. You can do sort of mini ends or mini in services, a couple hours focusing on a topic. Again, the point is, part of team building and taking and leading your team is engaging with them and helping them to engage with each other. I encourage you to look at those on your own. And then one of the tools, we talked about the Johari window and the Nohari window. There is also some who say, create a user manual for yourself. Spend some time and write down like how people can best make the best of you. That's an interesting concept. But think about it. Like, here are the things I like, and here are my preferences, here's my style. And the whole team can do it. And we can all have user manuals and share our user manuals with each other to know how we can work together better. I wish I had more time to talk about that, but I don't. Now, y'all know who Dolly Parton is, right? She's a country western singer, a legend. I love Dolly. I've always loved Dolly. Dolly says, and I wish I could do a Dolly, impersonation, but I cannot, and I will not. So I'll say it in my voice. Dolly says, if your actions create a legacy that inspires others to dream more, if your actions create a legacy that inspires others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you are an excellent leader. If I was in church, I'd be shouting right now. If your action creates a legacy that inspires others to dream more, learn more, and do more, and become more, then you are an excellent leader. Empowering healing and change, healing in individuals and in communities and organizations and countries, seeking to understand and inform change, driving systems to change. We have challenges in all of our countries, all of them. And wherever we sit, whatever we can do as individuals to make things better, to inspire others, let's do it. I am glad to be leading in the United States at this time, when in my own country there is so much division and we're at unrest. I'm glad that God has placed me in leadership now to try to do the best I can to unify and empower where I am. And I am so glad to be in an international space that reminds me how big the world is. It reminds me we all have challenges. It reminds me that leadership matters no matter what. And it does. Thank you for your time. This has been amazing for me. I hope it has been for you. And I'm now going to hand back over to our host so we can take some questions.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you, Terrence. That was an incredible, actually exciting presentation of leadership. So yeah, thank you for that incredibly thoughtful, powerful presentation. We now have time for some questions. We've gotten a couple into the chat already, but please feel free to continue submitting questions while Terrence and I have a little chat here. So the first question comes from Betty, and she says, or she asks, can a leader have a mixture of two leadership styles?
Yeah. That's a great question, Betty. And I'll go you one better. A leader can have a mixture of many leadership styles. For the most part, we generally have a usual style where even if we try to fight against it, it's our normal way of working. And so because all those styles can work, if we should generally work within our normal style, whatever that is, and then be ready to shift if we need to. In some of these surveys, though, when you actually do the scales, there are people who will, when they take a quiz or a survey, an assessment to pick their style, there'll be two that are like equal. And so it's very possible that some people have two dominant styles. Normally not three, but some have two dominant styles. And quite frankly, those leaders can also often be very effective in being able to move between styles without it seeming artificial.
Awesome. Thank you for that. This next question is a pretty in-depth one, so I'm interested to hear what you have to say. So, Herman from Mexico, regarding governance, how much of an impact does a conflict of interest have on leadership, and what are some ways to address the issue?
So, involving governance.
Yes.
Read it again for me.
So he said, regarding governance, how much of an impact does a conflict of interest have on leadership? And what are some ways to address that issue?
Well, it depends on what the conflict is. That, leadership is about integrity. And this is true everywhere, folks. Even in places that have authoritarian governments, that there is something about the leader, something about that leader, which people find in some ways comforting, especially if they, for a period of time. And the one thing that is generally true is that even people don't follow anyone any longer than they have to if they don't believe that person ultimately is looking out for their best interest. They're often even okay if you get rich in the process. Sometimes they're okay if you reward your friends, as long as they believe that at the end of the day, that leader is looking out for me. And so that is sort of the crux. When there's a conflict of interest, when someone in leadership is benefiting from decisions they're making, that happens in many, many settings. And its impact on leadership is the extent to which, at the same time, people feel or recognize that this person's primary reason for being where they are is something that is different than what they're saying, different than what the Constitution says, different than what we thought we were getting. So, since you mentioned that, one of the things as a leader in a US based NGO, I have always been careful with is to be sure that I am above reproach, that no one can accuse me of any kind of misconduct. And that matters. Because even when it's not true, even when it's just an accusation, that can be harmful. So conflicts of interest matter. Depending on what the conflict is, it can completely demolish leadership. But mostly people will follow individuals if they believe that ultimately they are trying to make things better, even if they disagree with the approach.
Yeah, conflict of interest. It's a tough one.
It is. Yeah.
It is. It is. So we just got one from Pamela. How do you deal with groups who oppose a leader using a leadership style they believe is most suitable for the organization? So that's a good one. That's an interesting question.
It's a great question, my
It
friend. And
is.
listen, some people, it's analogous to, let's say, if you're working with a client, and let's say you have a strength-based way of working with the client, and therefore you're not going to make all the decisions for the client, and you're not going to tell them what to think. Yet they're kind of used to that. They're like, wait a minute, tell me what I should do here. I don't, why are you asking me these questions? Tell me what to do. They don't like it, but you are convinced this is the best way to help them in the long run. It's analogous. It's analogous to that. That 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 a team may be either accustomed to a certain kind of leader and a certain kind of leadership style, and when you're different, that's jarring. They've gotten accustomed to something different, and now you're leading in a different way. And that difference may look to them like you are either uninvolved, or you're not strong, or you're too strong, or you're too committing. That's often about a contrast. That's often about either people, you are different than they thought you were, or you're different than whoever was before you. I stepped into a position after the previous leader had led well for almost 20 years. And because we're two different people, we are leading differently. And I was fortunate that I didn't have to get rid of the whole staff. I kept almost everyone. And so as the team and I have gotten to know each other, we've had to get accustomed to each other, including my very different style. So that happens. You can only lead from where you are. And at the end of the day, if you're leading from your heart, if people trust your intentions, if your style incorporates listening, yet being who you are, it'll in the end, people generally adjust. And mostly, my friends, if in the end people trust you enough to follow you, and your leadership gets results, and your leadership gets results, then it's all good. It's a great question.
Awesome. Oh, and you can stop sharing your screen so they can kind of see
Let's
us
do
a
it.
little bit better.
Mhm.
Yeah. Let's see. Next question came in from Zach, and this is also another good question about growth. So, how do we self-renew so as to maintain cutting edge in leadership?
Yeah. No, I'm so glad you asked that question. And there are very few presentations when I'm talking about leadership that I don't end with something like that. That at the end of the day, leadership is tough. It is, even if you love it and you're good at it, it drains us. We need to be, if we're leading effectively, we need to be emotionally engaged. We need to be intellectually engaged. There's a lot of stuff. Many of us aren't leading huge corporations, so we've got to both do vision and do the work. We got to be both a visionary and inspiring, and also we got to be at the ground level, helping get the job done day to day. That's true for me, and that can be draining. And at the same time, our whole life is going on. We're not just a boss somewhere. We also have families, and we have conflicts, and we're going through divorces, and we're trying to get married, and we're trying to raise children, and we're concerned, and we're dealing with illnesses. And so all that's true at the same time. And so every single day, I urge leaders and aspiring leaders, even if it's only 20 minutes, to have time in solitude that's just for you. Whatever reminds you of what or who matters most, whatever encourages you, however you unload the burdens of leadership, spend some time every day with that. And then take time off, for real time, not time where you're still, checking this every couple of hours. Even if your job means you have to check it some, because mine does. I'm not allowed to completely ignore this, but I can certainly ignore it for a few hours, while I do other stuff. So take some real time off so that you refresh and renew. It looks different for everyone, but it's essential. In fact, in next month in Seattle, Washington, NADAC is having our national conference, and I'm doing a presentation that's entitled "The Ethics, the Ethics of Success, Struggle, and Self-Care for Addiction Professionals." And that's really what this is about. It's about how we have an ethical obligation to be as okay as we can, to renew ourselves so we can make good decisions in providing services. So, and it's hybrid, by the way. It's a hybrid conference, so you all can join internationally if you from where you are if you want to. So yeah, it's a great question. It matters most, and even if, and I know we have time for a couple more questions, but don't forget my answer to his question, because that does matter. And you find ways, however it looks, to be sure that you get re-encouraged emotionally, rested and reinvigorated physically and spiritually.
Awesome. All right. Another question just came in. Victoria asks, what happens, and I've dealt with this, what happens when you are considering change, but subordinates, the people that you're leading, seem unready for the change?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you may be perceptive, they may not be ready, but that's actually normally the case. That it is less common that when in leadership, when the team is ready to change and when you think things need to be changed, that they're perfectly aligned, because change is always different and always difficult, and sometimes people prefer the devil they know to the devil they don't know, and so that's always going to be an issue there. So you really do, my friends, even if you are the decider, even if at the end of the day you can do what you want, you can change the rules, it's important that you sell people on the need to change. You have to show them, you have to explain and lay out in ways they agree with why staying the same is not okay. While either staying the same is not going to work right now because of these things, or it's not going to work in the future. You have to convince people of it, even if you have the right to do it. People, people have to agree to lead you. I'm sorry, people have to agree to be led by you. They have to agree to that. It's a mutual agreement. And sometimes that means you being thoughtful about the change, involving them in the process of exploring if and how we need to change, and then ultimately convincing them that even if it feels safer to stay the same, we have to change. And then sometimes I have found that in the course of life, work life, things will happen that'll demonstrate, yep, we need to change. Make the most of those. Highlight those as this is an example of how we have to begin to do things differently and look differently. A great question that we all grapple with.
Yes, we do. This next question comes from Isa, I believe.
Hmm.
Sorry if I mispronounced. They're from Kenya. My question is to understand how personality influences leadership styles.
That's a great question, and it's that and because it is hugely influential. Our personality is more influential on our impact than is our appearance. I mean, sometimes we focus on trying to look like a leader, and I do that too. I didn't come in a sweatshirt today. I could have, and if I had them though, my personality would have still come across. Personality does matter. People follow people, and they get a sense of who you are by your personality. However, research shows that people that when they look at effective leaders, people who have done great jobs, some of them are extroverts and some are introverts. So it's not as if like the extroverts are the better leaders or the introverts. That that our personality is always a part of leadership, and um, and 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 people can follow people with very different personalities. When I think it most impacts ISA, I think it most impacts when if our personality is somehow whether or not it encourage. It is easy based on our personality to demonstrate certain traits that people need to hear. Like, is our personality naturally warm? Do people naturally feel like they can approach us? They might respect us and recognize this is the leader. That's a good thing too. But do they feel like you're human? And is that my personality, where people feel like I'm someone who is both in leadership and worthy of respect and maybe awe, but also a person who cares and feels. I'll end with this. My last international trip, hoping not my last one ever, but my most recent international trip was in Nigeria, to Nigeria for the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime last year. And we went to lots of places, but we also were honored to be welcomed. And I don't remember the details, I'm so sorry, but welcomed into the meeting and living space of a leader there, one of the revered leaders in that community who was treated with great awe by everyone around him. And as he sat down and we all sat down, what I most noted was, as much honor as he was clearly worthy of and receiving, he also was very warm, and he made us feel very welcome. He was very respectful to the young men sitting down at his feet. He acknowledged them. That was part of his personality. And so, yeah, personality matters. And we really don't change our personality, but we certainly can be aware of our personality and whether or not it is enhancing our connection and our leadership. And if not, making adjustments as best we can. And that's it.
Awesome. I have one more question. Because in the work that I do in recovery spaces, we hear a lot about servant leadership. Where does servant leadership fit in Dan Goleman's 6 types of leadership?
Yeah. Well, he doesn't use that term as much, but so much of what he describes is rooted and grounded in servant leadership. In his description of emotional intelligence and leadership, and leadership, and the reason why good leadership matters. So it certainly is a part of, wasn't what he studied in particular, but as he outlined the more details on when these various leadership styles produce better results, that was sort of a common theme. These were leaders who clearly were committed to the teams and the work, and not to the privilege and the perks that come with leadership.
Awesome. So true. All right. I think we're all out of time here. So thank you again, Terrence, for helping us finish this series with your in-depth experience in leadership. And thank you to all of you for being here. As we've heard today, leadership is not a one-size-fits-all, shaped by personal experience, culture, access, a board of directors, which I have, my own personal advisors, and community support. As we continue this journey together, we invite you to reflect on how your work can honor and uplift those affected with substance use disorder. So you'll receive a follow-up email shortly with the webinar recording, the slides, additional resources. Please also take a moment to complete the short feedback survey. We'd love your thoughts. It's how we improve. So it has been a pleasure for us to bring you these 6 webinars that are revolved around core foundations, the basics, and leadership in recovery spaces. Continue the message of recovery in your local communities, nationally and internationally. Our voices matter.
Yeah.
And with that, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.